Welcome back to We Get Mac. We're going to continue to talk about money and banking. So now we're going to dive into the banking system a little bit more. Okay, so now that we talked about money, let's understand a little bit the institutions that deal with money the most. And for this class, primarily we're going to focus on commercial banks, credit unions, and savings institutions. So primarily institutions that are taking on deposits from savers, okay, and then they use those to give out loans to borrowers. And of course, they can be risky because they don't keep all their money in the vault, right? They're making loan with the money of depositors. So because of these types of risks, we have seen in the past, a lot of banks failing, especially in the early 1900s, okay? And due to that, we came up with the idea that, hey, maybe we should have some type of regulatory institution that can oversee those banks. And that's the idea behind the Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank. Okay, so the Federal Reserve System allows the Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank, to oversees it and try to help those banks to stay healthy even during financial crisis and things like that. So it's trying to guarantee the health of the financial system to make sure everything is working properly. Okay, so how is the Fed organized? We're going to dive more into it when we talk about monetary policy and when we discuss who defines policy and how it's done. But just for now, I just want you to know that there is mainly there is a board of governors that think about it as the ones that pretty much are running the Fed. Okay, there's 7 members. It's 2 terms years, and they can be reappointed, but not more than 14 years. Okay, those are appointed by president, and they have to be confirmed by Senate. So there's a process to go through this. But as you can see, the people don't vote on them, right? We voted for the president and to elect Senate, and those are the ones choosing those individuals for us. Okay, there's also the chairman and the vice chairman, or chairwoman and vice chairwoman, where they are the president of the central bank. That's a good way to think about it. Okay, and the vice president. Those are 4-year terms, and they can be reappointed as well. And this depends on the president appointing them as well. Okay, so for example, when Trump came in, he decided to appoint Jerome Powell instead of keeping Janet Yellen. So we'll talk about a little bit about the most recent chairman and chairwoman, so you can get an idea about the past, the most recent history of the Federal Reserve. But for the purpose of this chapter, all I'm worried about is you to understand that there is some type of organization that the Fed is based upon. Okay, so who has been the president, the chairwoman, chairman of the Fed in most recent times? Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is Paul Volcker. He dealt with the high periods of inflation and unemployment, the stagflation in the US. So he had to really deal with high interest rates. Okay, and we talked about him a little bit during inflation, and we'll discuss him more as well during the monetary policy chapter. Okay, the next one that came was Alan Greenspan. So he was the guy known for the deregulation of the banking system. After Paul Volcker dealt with all those problems, Alan Greenspan really came in and said, hey, we need to give those banks the ability to generate more wealth for society. So let's deregulate them and let them operate in a more free manner. Okay, and some may say that that's what led to the bubble and the housing market crisis of 2007, 2008. Who had to deal with that was Bernanke. So Bernanke was the one that had to deal with the problem of, hey, the economy is failing, banks are one of the causes of this, and are we going to let those banks fail, or are we going to save them, bail them out, so pay their debt and be able to make sure that they're solvent? Well, what do you think would be the best thing to do? It's a tough call, right? You need to decide, am I going to let all those banks fail and the economy suffer the consequences of maybe not trusting financial institutions as much, which would stop maybe loans from being generated as quickly? I don't know. It's a big question. But at the same time, bailing them out, imagine it being a bank. Hey, every time I go and do something risky, they're going to help me getting out of my hole. So I can be a little bit more riskier. So you can see the trade-offs here. And he chose to not let those banks fail. So he opted for not letting the economy face an even bigger recession at that time period. Okay, and then after that, Janet Yellen came in, and she was the first woman that was a chair of the Fed, and she had to deal with a very slow recovery from the 2007 recession. Okay, she was there just for 1 term because, like I said, Trump came in and decided to say that Jerome Powell was going to be his appointee for the chairman of the Fed. Okay, so Jerome Powell, one interesting fact about him is that he's the first one to not be an economist. So he's actually major in political science and has a PhD in political science. Okay, so it's a different idea. You can see that the economy is evolving, and so is the U.S. central bank, and we're going to see how that develops over time. Okay, but something interesting to keep on the loop and watch is that is he reacting different from other chairmen and chairwomen based on his background or not? Something to study, right? Something to pay attention to. But he's the current president, chairman of the Fed, and definitely something important to keep in mind moving forward in your life. Okay, so besides that, we're also going to talk about how, of course, the US is a huge country, and it'd be really hard for one central bank to control everything without having more assistance, right? So they delegate that into different regions, and there's 12 regions that the Federal Reserve characterize, and each one of those regions have their own regional Federal Reserve bank. Okay, and there's 12 of them, like I said, and you can see here how they're split, and you can see that West Virginia, oops, sorry about that, West Virginia is in the Richmond region. Okay, so that's the one that we're in right now. And moving forward now, we're going to talk more about the jobs Feds, the jobs of the Fed, sorry, and what is the role of the Fed in our economy? Why are they so important? Okay, so let's make sure to understand this regulatory institution that's so important for our economy. Okay, so stay tuned and we'll be back.